Fear holds so many people back from achieving greatness. People with immense talent, people with gifts, and people with the potential to change lives. And I don't want you to be one of those people. So today,
I think you gotta have a dream.
The School of Greatness.
Really?
Yeah.
Please welcome Lewis Howes.
I want you to take a second to imagine what your life would look like if you completely let go of fear and anxiety. Really dig in here. What type of people would you be able to meet? What opportunities would you be able to create for your career or for your personal life? Now, over the years, I've learned that there are so many things that keep us from achieving greatness, but perhaps none as much as fear and anxiety. It keeps us from sharing our gifts with the world. It keeps us from developing an unconditional sense of self-love for ourselves, and it keeps us stagnant in our life, wondering if we were ever meant for something more. And today, in the US alone, it's an estimated that 90% of the population says they're struggling with anxiety on a regular basis. Now, if this is you, leave a comment below and let me know if you're dealing with it now or if you've ever dealt with anxiety. But the negative impact of fear and anxiety goes a lot further than just keeping you from reaching your goals. If left untreated over time, that's when chronic anxiety has been linked to increased risk of heart disease, ulcers, reproductive problems, and even memory loss. So in this episode, I'm going to share 8 proven strategies you can use to reduce fear and anxiety today, no matter what the source, no matter where you're at, no matter your goals. We all deserve the opportunity to chase after our biggest dreams. And if fear and anxiety have been holding you back from doing so, then I hope this episode gives you the courage you need to break through. So get out a piece of paper and a pencil and let's jump in right now. The number one thing is to lead with curiosity instead of judgment. Now, this is a critical step because this will set the stage for everything else that we're going to discuss in today's show. The next time you feel anxious or afraid, it's important to not be so quick to push away or dismiss those thoughts. Instead of judging that thought or judging yourself for having it right away, I want you to try your best to be more objective by leading with curiosity instead of that judgment. So what you want to do is to begin to ask yourself some questions. What's causing you to feel so afraid at this very moment? Is there a pattern that you see when it comes to your anxiety or your fear? Is there a time of day or a specific day of the week where your anxiety reaches a peak? Now, I know being objective about your emotions is easier said than done, so I've boiled this down to a simple 3-step process that will help make this simpler for you. And step 1 is to ask yourself why. Why are you feeling this way? Really get down to the nitty-gritty here. Once you have your answer, I want you to label that reason as falling into one of 2 buckets. Now, it's either instructive or it's irrational. And I'll give you an example of each one right here. So let's say you are a personal trainer and you're terrified of losing all your clients and going broke overnight. Now, it haunts you no matter how much you try to get your mind off of it, right? You're constantly haunted by this. Now, if you have dozens of clients who love your work and have referred you to all their friends, then the chances are that this thought could be categorized as irrational. On the other hand, if you've been putting your business on the back burner lately, staying up late, going out to parties, and not showing up to your sessions on time, then maybe this thought is actually instructive. It's instructive because if you're being honest with yourself, you know that you need to step up and get back on track to continue keeping your clients happy and delivering results. Step 2, if the thought that you're having is instructive, then really lean into the positive aspect of why you're feeling this way. If we continue with the same example here, the fact that you're worried about losing your clients means you do genuinely care about your career and you have a high standard when it comes to your performance. So if you start putting in as much effort into your business as you normally do, then the chances are you'll experience much less anxiety and the fear that you might have if the thought comes up again. Step 3, if the thought is irrational, then take time to walk through the reasons why it is. Take out a sheet of paper and list the reasons why your clients love you and why they refer you to all their friends. You can even say these reasons out loud to yourself if this helps you build that confidence. But by getting all these reasons out on paper, it will become more clear that this thought is indeed irrational and reassure you that your fear is unlikely to become a reality because you show up consistently. Now, not only will this 3-step exercise help you notice patterns in your way of thinking, it'll also do something that's important when it comes to remaining calm through adversity, distancing yourself from the thoughts that you experience. Now, stay with me here. We all experience moments of anxiety, stress, fear, self-doubt. Where we get into trouble is when we start to tie our identity to those negative thoughts. Now, this is when we start to tell ourselves that because we're going through a moment of anxiety, that means that we're stressed out or we're an anxious person. Or anytime we experience a moment of fear, we start to tell ourselves that we're not a brave person. As my good friend and therapist Marissa Peer says, thoughts become things. And if we're not careful when we consistently entertain the wrong thoughts, it's only a matter of time before that negativity starts to manifest into things. By leading with curiosity and not judgment, you'll be in a great position to reverse this harmful habit anytime it comes up. Number 2, figure out if it's time to procrastinate on purpose. This is an important one that might seem simple, but I also see so many people suffering by not doing this. And if you've tried a million different tactics or techniques and strategies to deal with your stress and nothing's worked, then I want you to answer this question honestly for me. Are you putting too much on your plate? Have you tried to say, I'm going to do 10 different things that I'm excited about right now? If you constantly find yourself being anxious and paralyzed from stress, then you might be filling up your time with too many different things at once. And if you have a demanding job that you're extremely passionate about, then maybe it isn't the right time in your life to launch a startup you've been thinking about and 10 other things at the same time. If you're a busy entrepreneur with kids and an active social life, then maybe it isn't the right season in your life to sign up for that 6-week dance class that you've been wanting to do and you've been wanting to take. You've got to be clear what season of life you're in, and there's nothing to be ashamed of when it comes to taking things off your plate. For me, I've got a packed schedule and a business to run, and I'm also active in my fitness and my relationships. But even I like to unwind and go to the movies or check out a new TV series with my girlfriend. I don't always have to pack everything on my plate with every down moment. And if I didn't have a chance to recharge, I don't know if I'd be able to show up to the studio day after day, excited about what I'm doing. My good friend Rory Vaden has a concept that I love called procrastinate on purpose. And the next time you need to put something off that you've been wanting to get to, don't beat yourself up about it. I think that's what a lot of people do. We judge ourselves and beat ourselves up for not doing the things, everything all at once. Instead, reframe that thought by telling yourself that you're going to procrastinate on purpose. You're procrastinating with the intention of getting to that thing during the right season of your life. And if you have a goal of launching a YouTube channel, but you're 100% certain you don't have the time or the resources to do it effectively at this point in your life, then don't tell yourself you're a failure or you'll never get to it. Instead, give yourself some compassion. Tell yourself that this isn't the right season for your life just yet, but you'll get to it soon. Procrastinating on purpose isn't giving up on your dreams. It's actually the opposite. It's recognizing that we only have a certain amount of time in a day, and putting a dream on the shelf for a while doesn't mean it'll be there forever. It's okay to say no to things based on your other priorities in life right now. And in the same way, my friend and New York Times bestselling author Donald Miller has an effective way of saying yes or no to ideas that he has as opportunities that come his way. And he thinks of his life as being 3 different stories that he's the hero of. Now, this is a cool concept. His story of creating a business is one. His story of being a father and a great husband is another. And his story of helping build the middle class. And if he has an idea that doesn't contribute to one of those 3 stories in any way, then he passes on those ideas. Now, I encourage you to get clear on the stories that you have for your own life. What things do you want to accomplish? What goal do you want more than anything else in the world? Now, by getting crystal clear on this, you'll know what to prioritize and what to procrastinate on purpose with, which will take a ton of stress and anxiety off your plate. Okay, so that's number 2. Number 3, have a grounded game plan. Now, this is a big one. In times of fear and anxiety, our bodies naturally go into fight or flight mode. And during these moments, It's hard to have logic or rationality. It mostly goes out the window and it's replaced with emotion. And that's why it's so important to have a game plan that we don't even need to think about to help us get back to the center when things are happening. And for some people, this is having a strong scent that they can turn to, like lavender, which helps them calm down when anxiety sets in. So having something like that to calm you down, to get you back to a grounded place. This is because our sense of smell has the closest connection with our memory. So if we can associate a certain smell with a calming environment, it'll take us right back there during these stressful moments. For others, their grounding game plan is transcendental meditation or some form of meditation, which has been shown to help decrease the risk of heart disease, general anxiety, and even delay the onset of Alzheimer's. Another thing you can turn to in times of stress is also something we have access to 24 hours a day, and that is our breath. My friend and Dr. Andrew Huberman, he's a big advocate of what's called the physiological sigh. I've talked about this and shared this a bunch since I've had him on. This is a pattern of breathing that's been scientifically proven to reduce stress. Now, to do it, all you need to do is inhale twice through the nose, one long inhale followed by a quick, shorter one, and then exhale deeply through the mouth. So you do this like this. You repeat this a couple of times, and the pattern of breathing that a physiological sigh recreates is actually the same way that we breathe during sleep. So what this does is it helps reduce the amount of carbon dioxide in your bloodstream, which leads to a lower resting heart rate. Now for me, I've got a lot of different tools when it comes to remaining calm through stressful times. But one that stands out is a 2-part ritual that I do before I go to bed. It started when in my early 30s, and it's been an absolute game changer for me ever since then. And before I began to open up and start to heal the emotional wounds that I've been holding on to for a long time, I always found it challenging to go to sleep at night. The second I laid my head on the pillow, I'd have negative thoughts, I'd be stressed, I'd be anxious, I'd be thinking about the day, and it would take me like an hour to 2 hours to go to bed. And after I began opening up and being more vulnerable and processing my emotions in a healthy way, I also started this new nightly ritual, and I started to ask myself things about what I was grateful for, specifically 3 things I was grateful for that day. And once I have those things in mind, I ask myself this question: what am I going to do tomorrow to be of service to more people? And this ritual has given me so much more peace, and it helps really calm the negative thoughts that have been swirling in my mind from the day. And today, I'm happy to say that I don't have much trouble going to sleep. I put my head down and I sleep within a few minutes. And it's all thanks to having a game plan for how I'm going to stay grounded no matter what life throws at me. It doesn't mean life's not going to be challenging. It's about having the game plan for when it is challenging. Number 4, lean into your fears until the fears disappear. Now, this is a principle I've discovered for myself and I've found to be true time and time again. And that's the fact that until we fully lean into the things that we're most afraid of and face it head on, it'll always be there. If we want our fear to disappear for good, then we need to lean into it rather than avoiding it. It's challenging to do, but it's a simple concept. Now, this might seem simple to think about, but the reason for it goes a lot deeper. So much of our fears and sources of anxiety stem from one main thing: not taking action. Think about how many times you've been afraid of something before doing it and been resistant to actually taking that first step. Every one of us has been through this at some point in our lives. Now think about how many times you've been afraid of something while actually doing it. Almost never. You don't have the time to be scared because you're too busy actually doing the thing. You might be nervous, you might be worried, and that first time might be uncomfortable, but then after you do it once and you realize you're still alive, and it's easier to repeat the process over and over. And if you talk to someone who has skydived, they'll tell you that the scariest part was being on the plane, but not jumping out of it. Maybe once in a while, but once you're out there, most people say it was amazing and I want to go back and do it again. If you talk to someone who went skiing or snowboarding for the first time, the scariest part was looking down the slope of the mountain or going up the mountain. And actually, once you're doing it, you get excited about it. You start learning after you fall a few times and you become more comfortable with it. but you got to be willing to face it head on. It's always the anxiety of the thing, but once you start doing it, it becomes easier. This is a principle that I've applied in my own life. I started in my teens. I used to be terrified of public speaking, so I signed up for Toastmasters and I leaned into that fear. I went every single week to practice until that fear disappeared. And I always wanted to be able to salsa dance, but I was afraid of looking goofy and silly starting out. I remember for 3 months I had anxiety, just the idea of like putting myself out on the dance floor. Once I got out there on the dance floor, it was nerve-wracking in the start, but then it became fun and it became exciting. And I started to go every week salsa dancing to improve until that fear disappeared. And even the School of Greatness has its origin in this mindset. After I sold my marketing company many years ago, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do next in my life. This is pre-School of Greatness podcast. I began to lean into that fear by learning everything I could from the mentors around me. What strategies, frameworks, and blueprints did they apply in their own lives that made them successful? By leaning into that fear, it became clear to me what the purpose and mission for my life was going to be for this next season of life. And this isn't just some woo-woo tactic either. It's actually rooted in science in what's called exposure therapy. This type of therapy happens when people with certain phobias or anxiety disorders are exposed to what they're afraid of in a controlled, confined environment. People with a fear of heights are slowly exposed to those heights. People with social anxiety are slowly exposed to events and interacting with strangers. And sure enough, studies have shown that over time, exposure therapy is extremely effective. Anywhere from 60% to 90% of people who practice it end up having no symptoms or mild symptoms of their fear after completing therapy. And that's powerful. Not taking action on our fear and anxiety is like quicksand. The longer we put it off, the more we're afraid of, and the stronger hold it will have on us. So if you have a fear that you've been avoiding, I challenge you to write down a list of your biggest fears. Put it on a piece of paper, put it on your whiteboard. Put it somewhere and look at it every single day. What I want you to do is start taking action by facing that fear little by little. And I guarantee that if you do this consistently, if you do it every day, something where you expose yourself to that fear, the fear will eventually go away. Number 5 is the 5-step neurocycle process. Now, this one comes from my friend and world-leading neuroscientist, Dr. Caroline Leaf, and it's typically used for overcoming grief, but it's also an incredible tool for overcoming moments of intense anxiety and stress. So the next time you start feeling anxiety come into your mind, put these 5 steps into practice. And step number 1 is to gather. Allow yourself to feel whatever it is you're feeling without holding back. So don't suppress it. Let yourself cry or scream into a pillow or whatever it takes to fully express the wide range of emotions that you're feeling. Step 2 is to reflect. Now take a moment to think about why you're feeling anxious. What about this moment or this thing in front of you makes you feel this way? Now, if you were responsible for giving someone else advice who was going through the exact same thing, what would you tell that person? What advice would you give them? Step 3 is to write. Take the answers you gave in step 2 and write them in a journal or on a piece of paper or store them in a Google Doc. And this will help you fully process the stress that you're going through individually. Step 4 is to recheck. Take a moment to reread what you wrote down and really absorb it. Now, do you feel guilty or ashamed about the way that you're feeling right now? Do you feel more or less anxious than you did before you wrote it down? And the final step, step 5, is active reach. This is where you reach out and ask for help about whatever it is that you're going through. And Dr. Leaf has a number of suggestions to get you started. First thing is to talk to a therapist or someone trusted about the way you're feeling. Be gentle with yourself and build more fun into your day. Take more walks, go to the gym, get more sunshine, find nature to be in, or even treat yourself to a bubble bath, whatever it is for you to help treat yourself. Think in cycles, not lines. Dr. Leaf says to not get discouraged if you feel better one day, but only to feel like you've returned to the same negative space the following day. It's natural for grief, anxiety, and other intense emotions to be a series of loops that come and go. And lastly, remind yourself that this moment of anxiety won't feel like this forever. It's not going to be around forever. Remember that these are just moments and they don't define you. The sixth thing I want to talk about in this episode is to keep a bank of rainy day notes. I love this exercise and this practice. It's really cool and it can be a fun exercise for yourself as well. Sometimes the most important thing we can do to overcome our stress, fear, and anxiety is reminding ourselves of how we've already accomplished difficult things in our lives. And the chances are that the moment you're experiencing right now is similar to one you've already overcome earlier in your life, maybe years ago. To make sure these reminders are close by when you need them, you can create something called rainy day notes. These are little letters that you write to yourself that remind you about how much you matter, how much you've accomplished in your life, how much you've overcome, your gifts, your uniqueness, the things that you're grateful for, the contributions you've made on other people's lives, and so much more. These letters can take a variety of forms, but the key here is to be as specific as possible with the things you write down, and for it to all come into a place of gratitude. From there, store your letters somewhere safe. Don't look at them. But anytime you're going through a stressful moment, or maybe you're just having a challenging day and you're feeling anxious and scared, go to the place where you stored them, open up one or two of those letters and read them out loud. This is a powerful and really cool exercise. This will help remind you that you are capable of reaching the goals in front of you, or you're just capable of feeling that peace that you need in that moment. And by repeating your past accomplishments to yourself, you'll be able to not only think you can overcome your fear, you'll also begin to create an identity of being someone who overcomes difficult things on a regular basis. It's really important for ourselves to do something like that. And science supports the concept of rainy day notes as well. When I was speaking with Dr. Laurie Santos, the Yale professor and founder of the Happiness Lab, she told me that there are a number of studies that link expressing gratitude with the release of dopamine and serotonin. That release can come from expressing gratitude with ourselves in the form of a rainy day note or elsewhere in your everyday life. And when you feel happy and appreciative of the life you're living, fear and anxiety will start to fall away. Number 7 point of this video is to apply the Litchfield formula. Now this is interesting. This next strategy comes from a framework that is in one of the most classic books ever written on the topic of fear and anxiety. And that book is How to Stop Worrying and Start Living by the great Dale Carnegie. It's an iconic book that many still turn to this day to help free their minds of worry. In the book, Dale Carnegie tells a story about a man named Galen Litchfield, who was a prisoner of war in Shanghai during World War II when it was occupied by Japan. Long story short, there was a moment when tensions reached an all-time high after Litchfield hid some valuable items from a Japanese admiral without his permission. And during that time, there were a number of prisoners who were being tortured or killed as a result of similar disagreements. Now, Litchfield was terrified that he might end up in the same position. So when he returned to his room later that day, he developed a 3-step formula that helped free himself from a large part of his anxiety. Step 1 that he did was to analyze the situation causing you to worry. From there, determine the worst possible outcome if you fail. Now for Litchfield, the worst possible scenario was obviously losing his own life. Step 2, accept the worst possible scenario as if it was already going to happen. In step 3, focus on trying to improve the situation so that you end up with a better outcome than the worst case scenario. Now for Litchfield, after he accepted that the worst thing that would happen to him was his death, he determined that there were 3 things he could do about it. Number 1, try to escape, try to explain himself to the Japanese admiral in hopes that he would give him grace, or act like nothing happened. Now in the end, Litchfield decided to go with the third option. And to his surprise the following day, the admiral had either forgotten all about what happened or he had calmed down and decided not to pursue it further. Now, it's not every day that we're faced with a life or death situation, so here's some more common examples that puts the Litchfield formula into practice. Now, let's say you have the final round of a job interview in the morning. It's a job you've wanted for a long time, so you're nervous and you start to get stressed about it. Step 1, Think about the worst possible scenario. So in this case, it would be not getting the job. Step 2, accept the fact that you might not get it. Now, I know that might sound negative at first, but take a moment to actually visualize that you don't get the job. Step 3, now that you've accepted that there's a chance you might not get the job, what can you do to help make the situation turn out differently? Are there other places you can apply to? Are there interview questions that you know will be asked that you've been avoiding? Are there things you can rehearse tonight to give yourself a better chance at a better outcome? No matter what you're feeling anxious about today, the Litchfield formula can be a powerful tool to help ease your mind. And more importantly, identify the things that you are in control of and the things that you aren't. Number 8 of this video and of this episode is to turn your anxiety into your superpower. This is a cool exercise from Dr. Wendy Suzuki, one of the world's leading experts on overcoming anxiety. So when I interviewed her on the School of Greatness, she said that the first step in overcoming anxiety is for all of us to acknowledge that there's an evolutionary reason it exists. Experiencing moments of anxiety is a way for our brains to tell our bodies that we're in need of some type of protection. She went on to say that the problem today is that we aren't running away from bears or saber-toothed tigers anymore. And yet we're constantly exposed to stressful situations through social media, news clips, and within our daily lives. This type of overexposure activates the same responses in our nervous system as our evolutionary one does, causing us to feel overwhelmed, stressed, anxious, and mentally and emotionally drained. Now, Wendy has a way for us to reframe, rethink, and channel our anxiety into something positive. She says we all need to start turning our anxiety into a superpower for ourselves. For instance, let's say you're a successful wedding planner. Now, if you've reached a level of success in this field, you're probably an extremely detail-oriented person. Now, with this in mind, the next time you find yourself experiencing anxiety or worrying about something, take a step back for a second and begin to acknowledge yourself and actually just reframe that anxiety as being your superpower, which is being detail-oriented and a highly effective person. And without that attention to detail, you probably wouldn't have gotten as far in your career as you are right now. Now, this isn't to say you should totally ignore your anxiety or fear. It's actually saying the exact opposite. By labeling that anxious thought as the reason you're successful and having a positive impact on your life, you'll start to become more objective with that feeling. This will help you form a healthier relationship with your anxiety and know when to lean into your superpower or when your anxiety is coming from an irrational thought. So take a moment to think about the different types of things in your life that make you feel anxious and afraid right now. And after you determine those things, begin to dive deeper and see how that anxiety has played a positive role in your life as well. Maybe you have a superpower of generosity or empathy or always being honest or something else entirely. Whatever your anxiety stems from, reframing it into something that isn't 100% negative will actually help you in a massive way. So there it is, guys. These are the 8 proven ways you can destroy fear and anxiety in your life today. I hope you found this valuable in the strategies we went over and that you'll put at least a few of these to the test the next time you feel a lot of stress and anxiety. Before I leave you with this final thought, I want to make sure you like this video, leave a comment below, let me know if you enjoyed this and the biggest point that resonated with you the most of these 8 points. But I'll leave you with this. Fear holds so many people back from achieving greatness. People with immense talent, people with gifts, and people with the potential to change lives. And I don't want you to be one of those people. So today, I want you to take this episode as a personal invitation to live greater, to love deeper, and to let go of fear once and for all. I'm telling you, you deserve the peace of mind. You deserve the harmony in your life to let this go. So wherever you are, thank you for listening. Thank you for being here, and thank you for being you. And I'll see you in the next video. If you got value from that, then go ahead and stick around for more coming up right now.
Many years ago, there was a wonderful psychiatrist in London called Dr. Maudsley, and he had a great expression. It's always been my favorite, and it says, "The feeling that cannot find its expression in tears may cause other organs to weep. So he knew
Wow.
100 years ago.
That's beautiful.
So beautiful and so true.
The feeling that
Cannot find its expression in tears will cause other organs to weep. So he's sort
Pain,
of saying,
yeah.
if you don't feel the feeling, your
body will
body's going to
eventually-
feel it. If you don't open your mouth and say, you hurt me, don't be surprised if you get a screaming. I've got this screaming headache. I've got this angry red rash. I've got this thumping pain. And by the words they're using, angry,
Wow.
screaming, they're saying, I have rage that can't come
I'm not
out.
expressing it, but it's expressed through my
Yeah,
body.
because the body is very clever at finding something. I worked with someone who couldn't walk, and all she was, I can't stand that. I can't stand my ex. I can't stand my life. I can't stand my kids. And you can't stand up. Isn't that interesting?
Oh, wow.
She had sort of phantom leg pains because she couldn't stand anything. Believe me, it was also, well, what makes me sick is my sister-in-law. Oh, I'm so sick of her. She just makes me sick. I vomit in my mouth every time I hear her voice, and then they wonder why they're bulimic.
Right.
Because our words really affect our reality, partly because, and it's such an easy thing to say, every word you say is a blueprint that your mind, body, and psyche are working to make your reality. So we make our thoughts, and our thoughts make us, then we go out into the world and we justify our thoughts every day. But our words are a blueprint, and when you know that, you think, well, I better pay attention to that blueprint. I better not say this kid is killing me. My job is making me want to die. I'm so stressed out by what? The queue in Hughes Market. Well, go to Zimbabwe where there is no Hughes Market,
Right.
and there is no queue, and there's no money to buy food anyway. Then you can say you're stressed, because your problem, the queue in Erewhon and the bill, is someone else's fantasy dream come true. This freeway is killing you. You have a car. You have a look
job
at
to go
people
to,
on
yeah.
4 buses. I used to take my daughter to school, and I remember one day thinking that, oh my God, this commute is hell. And I saw someone at a bus and thought, how lucky I'm in my car.
You have to
I've
stop
got the
every 2 minutes,
heating.
yeah.
I've got a cup of tea. I've got an hour to
Your
listen to something. I
music,
can talk to
yeah.
my kid. I keep saying I want an hour to myself. Well, here it is. And I learned to stop doing that. But when you say, how are you? Oh, nightmare. It is torture. What? The traffic. Yeah, the traffic, the queue. People keep ringing me. The phone ringing. It's torture. Well, maybe if it didn't ring, that might be worse.
Worse.
Some of my clients who are models will say my life is hell because people look at me. It's like, really? Well, one day they won't, and then you might miss it. Yeah, but I get on a plane and guys hit on me. It's a nightmare. Well, put on a baseball hat and glasses, read a
hoodie
book.
over yourself,
Then
yeah.
they'll leave you alone. But that's not a nightmare. It's just mildly inconvenient. It's not hell.
Right.
It's not killing you. But we use these incredible words. This is torture. This is killing me. This is a disaster. What is? Well, I went to the bathroom and I forgot to pause my movie. Well, that's not a disaster. But when you use those words,
Right.
because your mind can't differentiate, just to feel like it really is a disaster.
But on the flip side of this, the beautiful part, when we understand and appreciate that our thoughts become
Our
reality,
things, yeah.
we can create the life of our dreams as well. We can start to manifest
Absolutely.
our thoughts by
Yeah.
visualizing, by telling ourselves what we want, who we want to become,
Yeah.
and taking those actions toward it. We can manifest our dreams.
You really can. You can stop being ill. You can change the shape of your body. You can
Change your
change your
relationships,
digestion. You can have physical things. You can change the way you interact with your kids. So here's a good example. My kid is a nightmare. Change that to my child is age appropriate.
There you go.
This builder's going to go, oh my God, that's a disaster. But a good builder will go, it's a challenge. When you said talking to girls is terrifying, you just change that to it's challenging. But hey, there's hundreds of girls out there. It's a numbers game. One will say
Some will
yes.
say hi, yeah.
And even if they say no, the only risk in life is not to take the risk. That's the risk. If you don't when you take the risk and it goes wrong, you learn something.
It gives you feedback for how to
Yeah,
show up differently the
sure.
next time. My girlfriend's a doctor of physical therapy, and when she works on people, she would agree with everything you're saying, because people's bodies are so tight, not
Yeah.
because of something they tore or something sore, but it's because they're holding on to something emotionally.
of
And
course.
she says once they start to talk, their bodies relax and
Yeah.
the pain goes away.
Yeah,
Like
I know
all the
that to
pain
be
where
true.
they can't lift their shoulder, they can't turn their neck. Once they let it out their feelings
Yeah.
about their relationship or their insecurities or whatever it may be,
Yeah.
that's when they have a pain-free body.
Because the body keeps score. The
Absolutely.
body holds on to pain and stress and tension and grief. And we carry around all this stuff, and yet we really don't have to if just more people knew. Even to say I'm enough every day.
Yeah.
And to say, another of my favorite things is I'm choosing this and I'm choosing to feel great. I'm choosing to work on my website all weekend. I'm choosing to go to the gym. I don't love it, but I love having a six-pack. I'm choosing to say no to Krispy Kreme donuts and yes to
them.
apples.
Love Krispy Kremes.
Do you?
I could eat 12 of them right now. Oh, they're so good. But I choose to eat healthy.
Yeah, and if you say, I'm choosing to do this and choosing to feel great about it, your mind has a very clear image. The way you feel about everything is down to two things: the pictures you make in your head and the words you say, just if there's nothing else. So if you choose to run, going, I'm running, so I'm raising money for charity, so I'm going to complete this run. Even though my feet hurt, my knee hurts because I'm going to raise money. But you could run going, oh, I hate this. I could be at home watching Netflix, I haven't eaten, and now my knee hurts, and then you'll have to stop. So when you keep saying, I'm choosing
Because,
it. Yeah. So if you're an Olympic athlete, you would choose to get up at 4 a.m. and train. If you are a diabetic, you choose to put a needle in your arm. If you wear lenses, you choose to jab your finger in your eye. But you don't go, oh, I hate it. I can't accept it and I can't change it. And when you say I'm choosing to study, to work on, to go and talk to this girl I really like, or to put good food in my body, and I'm choosing to feel great about that too, there is no resistance. When you go, I want donuts and I can't have them, I've got to eat this freaking rabbit food, what your mind does is it increases the desire for donuts, because you said, I want donuts, but I can't have them. I want pizza, I'm eating kale.
I can't have these, but I choose to do this because
I can eat pizza every day. When I'm 95, I'm going to knock myself out with pizza. But right now, I actually want to look really good in my clothes, maybe out of them too. So I'll save the pizza when I'm 80, because that door is probably shut then anyway. Then you can have loads of pizza.
every day.
But you have to reason with your mind and negotiate, and your mind will always do what it thinks you want. That's its job. And if you could only tell your mind what you want using relevant, up-to-the-minute words, you'll get exactly what you want.
What do you struggle with telling your mind? Is there anything that you...
It took me a long time to tell my mind not to eat sugar. I still look at it and go, it looks so nice.
That's me.
But I still look at candy. The other day I was really tired, and I went into a shop to get a coffee, and they had jars of jellies, and I thought I could eat all of those.
All of it.
But I'm choosing not to, and I just had the coffee. So working out, we're on a schedule, sometimes just finding the time to go to the gym or do yoga, or making the time. Yeah, that's probably the only two, really eating healthy food all the time, even on a plane, even sometimes where there is no healthy food, then you've got to wait, and choosing to make myself exercise when I don't want to. But other than that, nothing really, because I couldn't do what I do unless I was really good at dialoguing with my mind. Is my best friend. It's the best PA I've ever had, and it does what I want because I give it clear instructions.
What do you say yourself on a daily basis? Is there like a process in the morning, afternoon, and night, or what would it be like? Actually,
when I wake up, the first thing I would say is I love my life. I love my linen, and I love my cup of tea. I always wake up going, I love my life. And then when I go, I love this tea, I love the coffee, I love the shower gel in my shower. Because I really believe that if you can make your mind get excited by little things, then big things every day is like Christmas. And I think when you wake up, you should go, oh, what have I got today? Oh, a world of stress. I've got this. So you should always wake up and go, I love my life. I'm alive in a free country. I've got all this stuff to make tea. And life is great. So I do that. The second thing I do is I tend to stay in bed and do all my emails, because then I feel like I'm not working. Because I'm in bed, propped up, drinking my tea, and I get all of that out of the way. Yes,
not
very
stressed.
relaxed.
It's more relaxed.
Not stressed. I try not to have to rush to go to bed, but sometimes I do. And I mean, I'm very lucky because I love what I do, and I do what I love. People say you work really hard. I go, I've never worked a day in my life. I don't know what that is. I don't have to go, my life is a weekend. People say, oh, the weekend. I go, what's a weekend?
I know.
I can
I
take
was trying
time
to
off.
days, yeah.
I mean, I love my job because I get to make such a difference. So I don't really have much to moan about. Maybe communicating with my daughter is sometimes a challenge because I'm so positive that she occasionally wants me to be super negative.
Why is that?
Well, I guess because you have to be the opposite of your parents. So I do all these positive. She's an artist and she does lots of negative statements on her paintings, on her T-shirts, because that's the deal. You've got to be the opposite of your parents. But I understand that. But she's great. But really, I don't have much to complain about.
You have a positive conversation with yourself pretty much 24/7.
Yeah.
What about a nightly routine? Do you have thoughts that you say to yourself?
Well, you see, for me, I really believe that first it's what you do and then it's who you are. So first you're doing it and then it's who you are, and it's so
Becomes a part
who
of
you
you,
are
yeah.
that it wouldn't occur to you to have to make yourself do it. See, I would never sit on the couch going, my case is lost, I just know it, it's all going to go wrong. There's no cabs out there, this is a horrible flight. I now have a belief, and it really achieved me, that there's no such thing as being bored. If my flight is late, I mean, I just get on my laptop, on my phone. I mean, I have 24-hour entertainment, empty out my emails, look at something. The days of having to wait and being bored, even waiting in the car, my little phone is like everything, books, messages, videos.
That's it.
And so I love that. I don't really mind about missing stuff and being late anymore. In fact, when I was last landing here 2 weeks ago, I was hoping the moment because I was so into this movie. It's like, no,
Hopefully it's delayed, yeah.
It was delayed. When the pilot said we've got to go around to the film, I was like, oh, that's so great.
Yes.
That's exactly how long is left of this movie. But I think it's important for people to understand that it isn't what you do. It's a bit like people who say, I've done yoga every day and now it's just my soul. Like Meghan Markle said that yoga is in my soul. I don't do yoga. Yoga is part of my life. It's like you don't say, I walk my dog. If you've had a dog for 20 years, you just get up, pick up the lead, and it's who you are, not what you do. And so for me, it really isn't what I do because it's so a part of me. And I like it, and so I'm quite lucky that I'm pretty happy and positive. But I really do love my life, and that's a good thing.
Was there ever something in the last 10 years that questioned everything that you've done, or that questioned your ability to say, I love my life, you know?
Well, I did get very sick like a year ago, and I thought, wow, how could that happen? You know, I'm so happy and positive and eat well, so I was a bit surprised when I got sick. But then I thought,
How did you get through that?
The same thing, the thinking, the belief. I decided I'd focus on massive healing. I kept telling my body that it was a cancer-fighting machine. I was making all these NK killer cells. And I did actually go home the next day. I was on stage a week later, and my doctor was like, wow, you become the poster girl for just getting on with your life. And now I look at one particular YouTube and think that's so bizarre. I had like major surgery just a week before that, and you'd never know. But again, it's the belief. I decided I do wellness. I said to the hospital, I need to go home. I went and I got into my own bed. I watched Ray Donovan. I thought, this is it. I'm doing wellness here. I'm not going to lie in that bed where they keep trying to give you pills. Right. And I didn't feel any pain at all because I just kept telling my body to heal itself. And then later I thought, maybe it's good I got that because I can help other people. And I go, look, you know, life throws stuff at you, but you get to choose how to deal with it.
Yeah.
And even then I noticed that I was very positive because I had actually got womb cancer. I thought, well, stroke of luck to get womb cancer. I don't need a womb. It's done its job. I've had a great kid. I talked to my womb and said, thanks for giving me this great kid, but now I've got to get rid of you because I've got to stay here and raise this great kid.
Wow.
And I thought, that's good. I mean, imagine if you get brain cancer or bone cancer. I felt very lucky. It was a disposable organ. They'd done a great job. I didn't need it. And so I think once you become like that, it's just who you are. So I never had, oh my God, I'm going to die. Because I thought, no, I'm not going anywhere.
It's all perspective, yeah.
It is all perspective. I mean, I still, people would say to me, but I thought you were so healthy, how could you get that? As it turns out, I have that same gene that Angelina Jolie has. But then, of course, Bruce Lipton would tell you can turn off a gene. you can mentally remove that gene. So even with adversity, because it's quite good in a way, because people think, oh, your life's just, you're like Pollyanna, just tripping along, having a wonderful life. That's not true. I've still had adversity. But your mind will always kick in when it's well trained and go, this is a blip. Just a blip, just carry on. And so you got to train your mind like you train a horse. You know, I always say your mind's like a Ferrari. And if you've never driven a Ferrari, it's going to go all over the place. But if you have Ferrari driving lessons, you're going to run that Ferrari. The Ferrari should not be running you.
There's a famous story about Jim Carrey where he said he would drive up Mulholland Drive here in Los Angeles pretty much every day or once a week and visualize himself acting in the main movies, the blockbuster hits, when he was like a stand-up comic on like open mic night type of stuff, right? He would visualize it. And he would sit there and he'd feel a feeling as if he's on the set with the big actors, as if he's receiving the checks. And he would write himself a check, I think it was for $10 million or $5 million. And he would imagine this happening, him receiving it. And then he would go do his work throughout the day and take action on it. And he always tells his story, or it's a famous story that he said, this is what I would do. I'd visualize this, I'd think about it, I wrote a check to myself years before it actually happened, but then it came to me. And this idea of thinking, again, and you mentioned the idea of like neediness, in a sense of like if someone's like too needy, then they're not gonna get it. People are gonna be rejecting that neediness, but when someone's comfortable in their own skin, it's almost like everyone comes to them, or things
like they already have it.
Like they already have
That's
it.
right.
And they talk about this in the law of attraction community about when you're chasing something or you're saying you don't have it. You're like needing something, you're saying you don't have it. But when you become comfortable with where you are, things start to attract to you.
And you have energy.
And you have energy, and you're like a magnet as opposed to an opposite magnet resisting these things that you need and want.
Pursuit is very taxing. And the reason is, there's a biochemical reason for this, is it's like wandering in the desert not knowing if there's water at all. That's really depleting. I mean, epinephrine is in the brain, and its chemical equivalent in the body is adrenaline. Those are the same thing. And if you're constantly in pursuit, right, you're just pursuing external goals, external goals, it will wear your nervous system down. You will be exhausted, and one will eventually run aground. You'll become mentally depressed. The key is to figure out what are the rewards that you can acquire along the way internally. Remember, it's subjective. There can also be external rewards, because many things have milestones, a Series A or a Series B for a company, then the IPO later.
Reaching 1 million users or doing this,
We have engagements before we have weddings, typically, right?
Yeah.
There are those rare instances where people just go and get married, but typically there's a lot of buildup that is designed, that fortunately, provides these reward mechanisms. So the key thing is that you can't just be all gas pedal all the time without rewarding yourself. However, the reward, that dopamine, is so powerful because it actually, as I mentioned before, it actually is the chemical substrate for epinephrine. It creates a reservoir of more energy. And again, I'm not talking about caloric energy or glycogen.
Mind energy.
It's mental energy. It's the desire to push on. It's the desire to keep going. And
so
again,
we need some consistent dopamine hits throughout the days or our months to give us more energy to pursue.
That's right.
But we don't want to be over pursued, because then we'll burn out.
That's right. And so everyone has to find where that sweet spot is, that kind of, on the freeway driving where it's really smooth and seamless, where you're not on the accelerator the whole time, where you're in a gear that's appropriate. And, we're talking now in terms of sort of, neuroscience lens on these things, but the key is always going to be practices. It's going to be, just as earlier we're talking about bringing stress levels up or down, depending on, or alertness levels up or down, depending on the kind of stress you're experiencing. The reward system is great because when let's say you're a person that can very easily access this dopamine reward. So you're always excited. People say, hey, let's do this. And your mantra is, let's go. And you just kind of go. What we call in science very low activation energy. You just go. That's great. Those people do run the risk of burnout. Although there are these people that we occasionally encounter that just seem to have boundless energy for everything, and they tend to get a lot more done because they have a lot more internal reward. And you'll notice they're getting rewards from all the little things. And it's 100% subjective. It's like hearing funny jokes all day long. You can just keep going. Incidentally, the beginning of relationships, when people fall in love, it's a real thing, but it is associated with a big flood of dopamine in the system. Makes everything seem exciting and possible and new. And I think that we also know other people that they have a very hard time accessing this dopamine system. And they either place it under the complete control of external things, so they're miserable until they get the payoff, and then sometimes they're even miserable then, or they really just they haven't learned the skills of how to access it.
So how do we trick our mind to find rewards in subjective things that aren't actually physically coming to us?
Okay, so I'll tell a brief anecdote about an experiment that's really important. This was done many years ago in a psychology department. I think it was done at Bing Nursery School at Stanford, but I could be wrong about that. So I don't want to state that as absolute fact. But the experiment nonetheless was done where they looked at kids in schools. These are kids about nursery school age or maybe a little bit older. And they looked at what they did during recess. And they found that some kids really like to draw. And so these kids would naturally just orient towards the crayons and pens and draw. And then for a short while, they rewarded the kids for drawing. Those same kids, they would give them a gold star or a little sticker or something that was special and made them feel special. So they were giving them an external reward. Then they removed the reward, and what they found is those kids drew at a much lower frequency. They somehow lost the intrinsic pleasure of drawing.
Because they were used to getting an extrinsic reward.
Suddenly, they associated the drawing. They thought they weren't conscious, but their nervous system said, "Oh, I guess I was doing it for the reward. Now there's less reward." And without going into a lot of details, there's a very solid scientific phenomenon called reward prediction error, which says that if you get less dopamine at the end than you anticipated, it's a letdown. If you get more at the end, then it feels great. Now, what this all translates to is, once again, learning how to attach internal rewards to the process of whatever it is that you want to do in order to get you to the thing you really want. And so the short answer in this, actually I was asked this recently, someone said, okay, how can I ensure that once I succeed, this was somebody who was doing very well in their pursuit of a goal, and they were getting close, and they said, how can I be sure that when I get to the win, that I don't lose the ability to keep working, because I really want this payoff.
I'm not satisfied.
Right, and I said, well, there's two ways. One is make sure that reward, really bask in it, really appreciate what you've done and what's come to you. And here's a very important but, take that feeling of being saturated with dopamine, the huge win, and attach it to the effort process that got you there.
So when you're thinking this took me 5 years to accomplish this thing, but reminding yourself of every day, week, year, all the little things you did on a daily basis to get you there. Not, we're here.
Right. That's right. If you think that you sort of, let's say Super Bowl win, the party at the end is going to be great, right? I have to imagine it's really going to be great. You
Champagne,
win,
you're this,
it's huge. But at that moment, people, the winners anyway, their system is flooded with dopamine. And there's an opportunity because dopamine, we haven't talked about this, but dopamine is a signal to the brain that it should rewire so that in the future, it has a higher probability of getting back to that experience.
Oh, wow.
This is how animals learn how to find water and food. This is at the basis of so many reward pursuits. And so if you attach all that plasticity, all that brain rewiring to the celebration and only to the celebration, you actually can erase a lot of the valuable content that your brain, skills that your brain acquired en route to that goal.
So it's almost like that whole night after you celebrate and maybe the next few days really reflect on the years it took to get you there.
That's right. We tend to so overemphasize the wins. It's the things of movies, right? I mean, there's some movies that are really good, like Rocky, the first Rocky, where he didn't actually win, he loses. And it was, so many people, I think it won Academy Award for Best Picture, right? So many people associate that film with the striving process. The reward was really in the striving. Yeah. His joy at the end of that was really called to, it was interesting, he called it to his family, to the process, right? It was really a movie that captured that in its best form. When it's just about the win, what you lose this amazing opportunity to attach the dopamine to everything that came before it. Now, in addition to that, there's one other way to do it. Nobody likes this one, but it works, which is also when you get there, give away the gold star. Give it away. And really...
So you don't fixate on the gold medal all the
That's right.
time.
And really high performers. There are a few people whose names, unfortunately, I can't mention, that I know who have done incredibly well in the Silicon Valley world. And some of them have given away a substantial portion of what they have. And everyone thought, oh, they want a simpler life and this and that. No, actually, they were just setting themselves up for the next big win. And they've gone on to do this 2 or 3 times now.
Really?
So they keep moving the carrot out in front of them, but they also are somehow intuitively understanding this process, that what got them there was not the last 1 yard into the end zone.
Was the 10 years of the
right.
journey.
It's necessary but not sufficient, right? But everything that came up until then is so important. So when we have dopamine in our system and when we've taken control of that process, we want to make sure that we capture everything that led up to that. And it's vitally important in these big, we're talking in these big milestones type of examples. But this can be done across the day. It can be, I'm going to get to noon just really being the most reflective person I can with my child. And not just doing that as a sheer effort, like, I really don't want to do it, but doing it and thinking, this is going to be a lot of work. And when I get there, I'm going to take a couple minutes to just register everything that I managed to control, all the things I managed to not do that would have been destructive. And so dopamine turns out to be, I would argue, one of the most, if not the most powerful neurochemicals in our system. There's a great book called The Molecule of More. I didn't write it, I wish I had, that gets into this whole description, which is quite accurate, about how dopamine isn't just about reward at the end. It's really the molecule of motivation. It's what propels us forward. It's an incredible read, really. A lot of real world examples. Very accessible book. And it really points to how so much of what we're about is the pursuit of these external goals, but that if we can learn to control these things internally, that's when things become kind of limitless, this word that everybody wants to access. Everyone wants to know, what's the pill that's going to make me limitless? What's the technology? We actually have the chemical inside us. The key is to learn to regulate it. And the subjective part, the example of good joke, bad joke, is the best example I can give, that you have to decide for you what lets you access that. And obviously those things should be things that are not destructive to you or to other people, because that will take you down a bad path. It also, we have to understand that dopamine can be attached to the trivial, anything. I could attach it to picking up and putting down this cap for my water bottle. But the point is that if that's not attached to some other thing, it doesn't really work.
Yeah.
So I know that this is a little bit less concrete than like 2 inhales and an exhale.
Right. I like this.
But this is the way I think, I'm certain, this is the way that the mind can be trained. We can train our mind to be in pursuit and in regular wins. And this is why I think there's a lot of interest these days in like habits and habit formation. Because when you move that horizon in close and you complete something small, it's not about what you completed, it's the fact that you completed. You're engaging a circuit. It could be making your
bed, it could be writing a page in your notebook.
It's like a little hatch flipped open, a little dopamine got deployed. It's like people who are like list crosser offers.
Yeah.
They're engaging this process. So I think what I'm describing again is not completely new. People will look to different examples of their life or other people's lives and say, oh, right, that's that. But that's exactly the point. I think that's the real utility of a discussion like about neuroscience like this, which is that once you understand the mechanisms, you can start asking yourself, where does this work for me? Where does it not work for me? And how can I maneuver this in healthy ways?
I'm curious, as we're getting to the beginning of the year, and a lot of people set goals for the year for themselves, or if they're ending a career, exiting a business, getting out of a relationship, they'll usually set some new type of goal for themselves. So whether it's the beginning of the year or you're just in transition and you want to set new goals, what do you think is, based on neuroscience, is the best way to set a year-long goal for yourself? Should we have 20 massive goals? Should it just be one big goal? Should we have 3 key goals? And how do we create the goal to where it drives us to perform at our optimal best and get closest to that goal, if not accomplish it? And what should we be thinking about throughout the year in order to accomplish the goal?
Yeah. Well, I can give an opinion on this, but it's just my opinion. I mean, I'd break up my life into these 12-week. I think it was because I've always done 12-week training cycles.
You're like an athlete. It's a season.
So 12-week training cycles. Just seems manageable somehow, with the understanding that there will be setbacks and things of that sort. I think that certain goals are goals of practices that we've already mastered. So, you're trying to next level what you've already accomplished. And so those goals are going to require a lot less limbic friction, if you will. And you already know how to access the rewards. You actually can predict the rewards and when they come. You actually know what the rewards are. You've really clearly defined them. Those are goals that I think we're sort of on autopilot with. And I think everyone should probably check in at the end of the year and say, if I'm going to continue along that trajectory, it might make sense for me to set some really concrete goals. Sometimes those are quarterly, financial quarters or academic quarters, if that's what the landscape they're in. But I think that that doesn't require a lot of us except more of the same, right? But those are nonetheless growth goals. And there's a little bit more friction there because
very challenging.
It takes more effort to lean in because when you don't already know how to do something, it's a very different goal pursuit, right? Sort of like
so if I already have my business and I've been running it for a few years, certain practices of how to get to where you've been.
That's right.
And you're thinking, how do I double my business?
That's right.
It's different than I'm trying to learn a whole new skill goal.
Right. You already know how to forage for water, as opposed to you're some young calf or some animal that needs to learn how to walk
to survive.
Go live right. So I think one big goal of the sort that we don't actually have the skill set yet, or we're not even aware of what we need in order to accomplish it per year seems like a pretty good goal to me. So learning an entirely new language or an entirely new physical skill. But with any long-term goal, the problem is...
don't focus on the destination.
That's right. Well, so you have to move the horizon in, but you have to remember there's that one little pitfall, that cul-de-sac that I described, where you'll tell people, this year I'm going to do blank, and if they reward you enough, you might not do it. Remember, if you get enough dopamine...
That's amazing. I'm so happy you're doing that.
That's
congratulations.
Right. And you say, I know I can do it, and then you sort of lose the incentive to do it. So a lot's been made out of making goals public.
Is it better to make them public or not?
Well, so this is a question. I don't know. I think that in my case it has. For me, telling several people that I'm going to do something, because I will work very hard to avoid
humiliation,
the shame and disappointment.
Yeah.
But I tend to do that with things I really want to do anyway, but there's a strong fear element. Like I'm afraid to do this, or I'm kind of anxious about doing this. So I'll tell people, and then I'm like, okay, now I'm committed.
Yeah.
I got to do this.
You got to do it now.
And I tell people that I'm certain are going to give me a hard time.
Yeah.
That's just my nature.
Right.
And I'm not trying to prove them wrong. I'm just trying to make sure that they don't have any ground to stand on.
Yeah.
And that's how I do it. I think for some people, the continuation of what they're already doing, if it's feeling like a lot of work, it's feeling exceedingly challenging, and they're like, oh my God, another year of this, another 5 years of that. I think that's when you have to move the horizon in really close. I think a lot of people right now are feeling back on their heels because 2020 was such a trying year for a lot of people. So many people are recalibrating what's possible. Although many people are feeling expansion and they're really going to go forward full steam. So I think continuing in pursuits that we already have some degree of mastery over and thinking about where could I notch that up another 2 or 3%, I think that's incredibly valuable. I think that provides a lot of value to the individual, to their families, and to society, really. Because a 2% improvement of like what you're already doing is going to have an outsized effect on what other people receive, right? Even though for you've been down that road many times. But taking on a new pursuit in parallel to that means really getting excited about the possibility. You give the Jim Carrey example, about the possibility and starting to imagine what that would actually be like to be, well, let's say fluent in Spanish, and you can just do this reflexively without having to try. That's totally within your reach. And I think there it makes sense to really think about the end point quite a lot as a way to get over those barriers of fear. Because when you already know how to do something, there's no fear barrier.
Yeah.
It's just an energy barrier.
Right. It used to be extremely difficult for me to sleep until I hit about 30, 31 years old.
Yeah.
And I would sit in bed for probably an hour to an hour and a half almost every night. anxious, worrying, thinking,
Yeah.
judging myself,
Yeah.
whatever it may be, stressing about something I haven't done yet, or really just kind of beating myself up emotionally. And what I've learned, there's two things that I've learned, well, really three things that I've learned that have helped me go to sleep extremely fast in the last 8 years.
Okay.
That has been like an automatic switch for me. One is going through a transition of fully sharing and starting to heal the process of my shame from the past. So like finding a therapist and talking about what I'm shameful about. You know, and really revealing the parts of myself that I never wanted anyone to know about me. There were so many things that I didn't like about myself that I was ashamed of or felt insecure around. And it made me feel like a prisoner to my own thoughts. Because I felt like I was, in a sense, hiding myself to the world and to the people closest to me. Like certain people didn't even know who I was. So I felt like an imposter at times. I was still a loving, fun, generous human, but I felt like there was a few things that people didn't know about me. And when I started to open up about those things, I felt inner peace. It didn't all go away, but I felt like, you know, a lot more peace. Number two was I started to focus on everything at night, what I was grateful for from the day. I was like, okay, if there was anything good today, what was it? Even if it was all bad, there had to be something. I'm alive, you know, you know, I'm healthy, or whatever it may be. I have a roof. So it's just focusing on anything, and I do that every night where I think there's about three things to be grateful for. That brings me like another level of peace. And then I think about, what am I going to do tomorrow to help people? How am I going to serve?
That's beautiful.
So it's like, you know, healing the shame, focusing on gratitude, and then thinking about, how am I going to serve? Not just, what do I need for me, but how can I show up for other people? That kind of three-part combination gives me so much peace before I go to bed.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
And it's a practice, you know, it's like a constant practice. It's not always perfect, but it's a practice,
I love the thinking about something you're going to do for somebody else tomorrow, coming from this practice of healing your own shame. One of the superpowers in good anxiety that comes from your own anxiety, and this is a beautiful example that you just told me, is the superpower of empathy. So
for yourself or others?
First for yourself, and recognizing it in yourself, and then giving it out to others. Because just as you described your journey, a lot of our own anxieties have been with us since we were little. Same anxiety
they stay for decades.
For your lifetime sometimes.
What was yours?
I have many, but the one that I talk about here is shyness and kind of social anxiety. And I've learned, because I'm a teacher and because I want to become an author, I've learned the skills not to have those kinds of anxieties. But I was painfully shy as a young girl. And even into college, I found myself in social situations and wanting to join and not feeling comfortable, or even in class. And so I realized that has become my superpower as a teacher, because I know when I'm standing at the front of the classroom.
Shyness is a superpower.
My shyness.
Really? Why is that?
Because when I'm standing at the front of the classroom, there are always those students that say, oh, I know the answer. And I know that there's many more that want to talk to me, that want to show me what they know, want to have that interaction, but can't do that. And so what do? I make sure that I am there 15 minutes before. I stand there. I talk to the students before. I stay after class. Anybody that wants to come up for a casual conversation where you don't have to be the one raising your hand. And I didn't even realize it until I wrote this book, that is a superpower of in-class empathy. And I have that particular form of empathy because of my particular form of anxiety, my social anxiety. And so imagine the 90% of people that have their particular form of anxiety. They know what it feels like. They know what's going through many of others of our minds. And what if you turn that around and you do what you do and say, how can I help somebody else in this way that I know I've struggled, but I also know what can help.
Sure. Okay.
So that's one of my favorite superpowers.
How do we know how to turn anxiety into something good? Like, if 90% of is this the U.S. or the world feels anxiety?
I think the actual study was about the U.S.
The U.S. 90% of the U.S. claims that they have anxiety on some level, right?
Yes, exactly.
And what does anxiety do for us when we don't have attacks coming our way? Like, if we're constantly in a state of anxiety, what does it do to the brain? And what does it do to our immune system and to our body and our emotions?
So that's a great question. The answer is long-term anxiety will have terrible effects on all of the physiological systems that are being activated. So what's happening when you have a stress response? Your heart rate is going up, your respiration is going up. So long-term effects of anxiety and stress are heart disease.
Really?
The other thing that's happening when you're in a constant state of stress is that blood is being shunted from your digestive and reproductive systems to your muscles, because you're supposed to be running away from the lion and you're sitting there worrying about your taxes instead, or whatever, the Delta variant instead. And so long-term effects, ulcers, reproductive problems, long-term reproductive problems with long-term anxiety. And that's just the body. So now we get to my favorite body area, the brain.
Yes.
And so long-term stress will literally start to first kill off the dendrites of your neurons, the input structures of your brain cells, in two key brain areas. The hippocampus, critical for long-term memory, in the temporal lobe, and the prefrontal cortex, critical for decision-making, focus, and attention. And so, for example, PTSD, if you have PTSD, classic example of long-term stress, your whole temporal lobe gets smaller. Why? Because you first start to degrade the size of your individual brain cells, and then you start to kill them off. And so that is not, memory problems ensue. So it is not good.
Is long-term also the same as chronic? Is that
Yes.
So long-term
Yeah.
stress, long-term anxiety is chronic anxiety
Yes.
and stress.
Exactly.
What's the definition of chronic? Does that just mean something that's consistent over a period
Over
of time?
months,
Yeah.
over months and years.
Okay.
And of course, there's different levels of intensity. Also, I should say that this book, Good Anxiety, is not addressing clinical anxiety. That is a different animal. For clinical anxiety, just as you would do if you had a broken leg, you
Yes.
need medical treatment. This
Yes.
is not a medical treatment for somebody that has chronic anxiety.
Yes.
This is the 90% of people that say, yeah, I have some anxiety every day. I call it everyday anxiety.
Everyday
So
anxiety.
these are some of the approaches and mindsets that you can use to start to shift that negative effect of anxiety and shift it into the basic brain activation that it is, and start to help motivate yourself to address the things that you're afraid of.
What are the common things that most people have on a daily anxiety basis, I guess? What is it? Fear of what?
You know, generally, and this is before the pandemic,
Yes, right.
fear of public speaking is one of the most common. Fear of money fears, another big one. I'm just thinking about all my own anxieties that I talked about in the book. Let's see,
Sure.
Early on, social anxiety is, they mirror the clinical levels of anxiety.
Okay.
One is general anxiety disorder, is just kind of life and situations and interacting with anything start to produce anxiety.
Yeah.
Social anxiety, obsessive compulsive disorders, one can start to worry obsessively about whatever that thing is that worries you. And of course, the thing that is on everybody's mind right now is the uncertainty around the coronavirus and everything that's
future.
happening in the future. We can't predict. We don't know what's going to happen in the fall with schools or work. For that matter. And that uncertainty is the key driver for a lot of anxiety.
So uncertainty in general
Yes.
is uncertainty about my money, uncertainty if I go to this social event, am I going to fit in? It's
Yes.
just kind of the uncertainty of life.
Yes.
Around different topics.
Yes.
It's uncertainty about my parents. Are they going to stay healthy?
Yeah.
It's just the uncertainty of life.
Yeah.
So that sounds like it's one of the main causes of everyday anxiety,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
How do we get comfortable with uncertainty so it doesn't consume us?
Yeah, that's a great question.
How do we embrace it and enjoy uncertainty?
Yeah.
And have fun and play and connect with it in a different relationship?
Yeah. So that is a great question. And the answer that I provide in the book is a multi-spoked kind of strategy. And one strategy that's easy to understand is, how do you create more joy in your life to kind of counteract
Yes.
all of these negative
That's so
things
good.
coming out? And so one of my favorite, this is in the toolbox part of the book, where I go through immediate, medium-term, and long-term tools that you can use to flip your anxiety from bad to good. And one of my favorite ones is called joy conditioning. Joy conditioning is mining your own memory banks for those joyous, funny, pick your favorite positive emotion events in your life, and consciously bringing them back up and revivifying them and bringing up those emotions. And my little trick for that is try and find a memory that you love that has an olfactory component to it.
A what component?
Olfactory, so a particular smell associated with it. Why? Because smells are really evocative of memories. It's very
They are.
easy to bring up everything associated with that memory if it has a smell. It's okay if it doesn't, but the one that I use is, I love this one because everybody might have an example of this. I remember a particular yoga class I went to in New York City, and I was doing so well. I was, up dog, down dog. I flipped my dog. It's like, yeah, I did really well. And then I was doing the pose that I do the best, which is Shavasana. So I was in Shavasana,
Is
feeling
that the one
really
where
good.
you just lay down?
Yeah, I do that really well.
You just lay on your back, or you're like child's pose. Yeah.
Exactly. I do that even better than child's pose. It's like I just lay on my back,
Just to see,
Shavasana.
yes.
And I was feeling really good about myself, had this great class. And then on top of all of that, the teacher came around and she put some lavender lotion on her hand and
put
she
it- yes.
waved it under my nose. And she gave me the most luscious 5-second neck massage that I've ever had in my life. Because, I worked out hard, I was feeling really good about myself. And so I literally, in my purse out there, is a little vial of lavender essence. And when I need a little pick-me-up of, remember the time I just felt so good, it was just this relaxing, feel-good moment, I smell that lavender, and that memory, that is my joy conditioning. I'm joy conditioning myself with that memory. But you can do that with whatever memory you want.
Joy conditioning.
Joy conditioning.
Is that a scientific term, or is that
That
something
is
that's...
Professor Wendy Suzuki's term, and it's based on my 25 years of studying how memory works
I love
and
it.
applying all of my knowledge to addressing anxiety. And it's really a direct antidote to fear conditioning, which we all experience automatically. So that's my example is my apartment in Washington, D.C. was robbed. And I walked around the corner. My door was the only one around the corner. And I still remember walking around the corner and seeing my door crowbarred open, hanging open when it was supposed to be locked. It's like, what's happened? And I walked in, which was not the smartest thing to do. Nobody was there. But every time I walked around that corner for months and months, I felt that. That is fear conditioning.
How do you flip it?
So that didn't go away. And
You had to move.
Yeah, I did have to move. It went down slowly. But to counteract that with something like joy conditioning is, invite friends over, create wonderful memories, wonderful safe events in that same space. It never went away, and I'll tell you why. Because that is a safety mechanism. You don't want to, the brain doesn't allow us to obliterate anything. This isn't like that movie, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Yes. So we can't do that. But we can counteract that very protective mechanism. Actually, I don't want to eliminate that. I want to be wary of areas and situations that were really, really bad for me. You
don't eliminate it.
I don't want to eliminate it.
What if it's been something traumatic, though, or someone breaking in, or a sexual assault against you, or something traumatic? How do we learn to heal the memory and the emotion of that fear, of that trauma?
Yeah.
To live with ourselves, or to live in the environment of a home that we can't leave yet, or how do we...
Yeah.
Is it just more joy conditioning? Are there other things?
Yeah, so this is where we get to that boundary between clinical
Yes.
levels and what this addresses. So
Gotcha.
I'm really not addressing, I went to Afghanistan, I have, terrible PTSD.
That's not that.
This can help a little bit, but it does not substitute for you need to go to a medical
Therapist,
professional,
yes.
therapist. And
Absolutely.
so, yeah, that is not a substitute. However, you can use these in addition to
Absolutely.
your, therapy approaches.
Any tool, I think, is a good tool to try.
Yes,
Any tool is a
exactly.
good tool to try. What's another tool we can use in order to quiet some of the negative anxiety that keeps us from joy, that keeps us from feeling good about ourselves? What's
Yeah.
another tool you like?
Yeah. We already said this, but I think this is one that so many people can use. And it was really inspired by a really good lawyer that I happened to meet at a party one day. And I told her, I'm writing this book about anxiety. And she said, I am the lawyer that I am today because of my anxiety. And I said, oh, tell me about that. And she said, I use my anxiety for all the different arguments that the other side is going to put up against me, or all the things the judge might say. That becomes my to-do list. Like, what if the judge says that? What if the other side brings this up, that up? And I turn that into actionable items. And so because I do that on a systematic basis, and I've gotten really good at that, I plug all the holes in my case. And I think you could apply that to anything in your life. And I love it because it is an act of turning the energy of just worrying, oh, what if this, into an action. That is really at the core of this book. Can you turn that inner turmoil into an action that is positive?
Right.
And this is one example that's easy to understand how I do that. Even if you get to the top 3 things on your list and do something about that, there is a satisfaction that comes from that. And you can feel that anxiety coming down with every check mark that you do.
Yeah, and if people don't turn their anxiety into a positive action, what happens? If they stay in it consistently, what happens?
Well, then we go back to what are the chronic effects
They get
of
sick.
anxiety.
Heart disease, long-term stress.
Yeah, right. And they stay in this negative emotional state. They stay in the state of pure worry, no action, and that is difficult to maintain, and it starts to interfere.
It's exhausting.
It's
It's got to be
exhausting.
emotionally draining to be in a constant
Absolutely.
state of stress, anxiety, and worry.
Yes, it is.
Draining. It's got to make you look older,
Yeah.
feel tired. I mean, I'm not sure what the research says about longevity if someone has a lot of stress and worry and anxiety, but I'm assuming you don't live long.
Yeah.
You probably die younger than you should.
Yes.
Have you studied anything about the blue zones? About the people that live in the blue zones
Yeah.
who live the longest in
Yes.
the world? About
Yeah.
how they manage anxiety or if they have anxiety?
Yeah.
And is there some benefit to having some anxiety, or is it better to just have this kind of worry-free
Yeah.
life?
Yeah.
Happy-go-lucky. I'm not going to let anything bother me. I forgive everyone. It doesn't matter what you do. I'm just a happy human being. Is
Yeah.
there some benefit to that or no?
Yeah. So I think that I think about anxiety now and all that worry and anger and all these other things that come with anxiety. I really think of it as kind of the wind in my sails. That is the little fire under my backside that gets me to do things, gets me excited, gets me to go towards the fear and get through it because I know there's something good on the other side. And without it, that is, I think there's certain perhaps times in your life if you are retired and aren't in this situation where you're dealing with the world, that could be great. That is the happy-go-lucky, no worries. But for most of us, I think it is very beneficial to learn how to take that fear that is depleting us, it is exhausting us, it's making us look older, and turn that into something that makes you feel better about yourself.
Yes.
It decreases the overall stress in your life. And frankly, it is more practical to say, look, I'm not going to be happy-go-lucky all the time. Nobody's happy-go-lucky all the time. but I'm going to use that bad stuff that is inevitably going to come in, and I am going to learn from it. I'm going to use it to my best advantage. And one thing we haven't talked about yet, I'm going to learn about myself through thinking about my anxiety rather than just trying to say, oh, I hate it, go away. What does it tell us about ourselves? And like for me, my social anxiety told me how much I love and I appreciate deep friendships because I didn't have them because I was too scared to start them.
You were so shy.
I was so shy, and it kept me isolated. And there's something wrong about that. I mean, that contributed to the isolation in the first place. And so the realization, and because part of the time it's like, I'm a lone wolf. I like being alone. It's okay. But actually, the truth was, I love being with people. It motivates me. So I had to get through that shyness to get that joy.
So if you haven't taken the time to really drill down your vision, then be sure to do it today. Do it during this episode, do it right afterwards, and start coming up with more ideas. Because it's the very first step to overcoming procrastination in the short term and in the long term. Now, step 2.